showing the interest in your research. And it is really interesting, and I think it has practical implications also for the future. So even happenings happen and continue to happen, and in that they have impact. I will leave that line, that was for Stuart, that was the first. I'm the second opponent, and sort of my conventional task is to talk about research methodology, or research method. And I will stick with that, and that will be the topic. And I will ask you some questions, one by one. I will not enumerate them. But first, before I begin to talk about research methods, I must mention something that has to do with methodology, but which usually we don't talk about in research and in academia. And that is, this itself is a performance. This book is a performance. And it's carefully designed, usually. And usually it's done so smoothly that we forget to think of it as a performance. But this one is crafted, as I wrote in the, and this makes it, you could say, well, it's, they should be so elegant and smooth and everything, but this is what I really appreciate with this dissertation, because we can experience the craftsmanship, or womanship, I'm sorry, in this dissertation. And that's not very often that we actually do. I will not say so much more about it. It's quite this kind of Brechthian quality. You know, we stop the theater performance and ask the audience what's going on there, what do you think? This has the same quality. You don't discuss it. It's not explicit, but it is implicit in here. And I would really ask you to continue to go a step further with that and explicate that. So that was the first comment on methodology, which is a bit unconventional. It is an unconventional dissertation. So, in the more conventional sense of research method, you have used abduction, you say, to come from the data and into the theory. And you have a hard task. You set yourself a very hard task because you did not want to get trapped by the scientific concepts. You did not want to get trapped by unequivocal or equivocal, if that's the right English term, you know, kind of Aristotelian concepts that classify things there, or there, or there. And that is an ideal we have in science, and you oppose it. You say you don't want to be caught in this category. You want to explore them, you want to live them, you want to see what happens with them. And in one could ask, is that really science? Is that something else? But you seem to have put yourself in the academic universe. So here we are.
Yes.
And this universe has conventions. And one of the conventions is the methodology of the thesis. And in this thesis, it's chapter 2 and 3 that deal with the methodology, or actually only chapter 3, and 10 pages in chapter 3. So it's not all that, but it's sort of diffused into the whole dissertation.
Yes. Can I comment?
Sure.
It is not me who puts myself within the academic universe, it's you.
You said that during the trial lecture this morning. Then you said that
no, I'm trying to place myself within the academic universe.
Yes.
But it's just like, you know, the urinal in the museum, the fountain. He tried, what's his name?
Duchamp, Marcel Duchamp.
Yeah. He tried to get that urinal into several museums, but he didn't succeed until he had been doing that for about 5 years. So in the same way, I'm submitting my thesis And luckily, you are my first committee.
And we are in the academic universe. And there's something called the PhD and the dissertation and the opposition, and that's where we are.
Yes.
And we have to accept that.
Okay.
This is change, occasion for change. It could be, but it's not. And within this context, I have seen, I want to apply more Foucauldian lens on the work that you have been doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of discursive, we're part of discursive formation,
Yes.
the academia, and it's many different worlds within there. And that formation is made up of concepts and also relations of power. And in the kind of field that you have been moving into, you are touching on several of these formations. And that makes a kind of extra challenge when it comes to the research methods that you have used. And that's where I want to go explore further and invite you to reflect more on that.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And I will
Okay.
say that it's your time to shine here. Well, you have already done that. But a PhD and occasion like this is a rite de passage. We both come from anthropology, so we have this within. So it's much more, it's actually a transformative event. And you are the main person here in this event. And it's your time to shine. At least that's what I aim for, and that my questions aim for, so that you can express. And there are things in this dissertation that I find haven't come out as much as I would have liked it. You may see something else, so then you may protest and tell me that,
Yes.
okay?
Okay.
And that's why, if you will please go to page 51. This is where it's a comprehensible overview that's relevant for a discussion of research methods and which methods you have used. And I will simply go through this table and ask you bit by bit, one by one, and try to separate them.
Yes.
Which methods you use in which phase. So there's 6 phases here. And they're all phases, and they're all part of this performance. So the research didn't stop. When you wrote this, when you analyzed the material, it continued. So if we go back and we start with phase 1, that's slightly more than 2 years, from April 2008 to August 2010. And there you talk about, you had conversations and meetings, you participated in live power exchanges, and you were moving in the organizational theory discursive field.
Yes.
Yes. And I will like you to invite you to reflect on your position of reflection in this field. As an anthropologist, to exemplify, we have the position of disinterested observer, or we can go native.
Yes.
Yes, that's sort of the opposite positions. That's common in anthropology. But you haven't only been there as an anthropologist, and I cannot quite get to how you reflected. You could be in the theory about reflection, which you didn't talk about this morning, and which I had maybe expected a bit more. Is the first person perspective, or it can be that's me, or you in that case, or it can be us, or it can be them, or it can be an object, kind of reflective position. So these positions influence what you see and how you communicate.
Yes.
And if you could,
Yeah.
invite you to-
So in the beginning, it's not. I was a native.
Okay.
Because I was doing facilitated processes and doing regional development. So that was where I was coming from. And then I found the LifeWorks as doing things, the same things, but in a very different and intriguing way.
Okay.
This phase, it goes from before the conception of the PhD project and until my I started full time in January '09. So I have been grappling with this role and trying to. In the beginning, it was very important to distance myself from the field since I had been part of doing regional development processes, and then I had kind of gone away from my anthropological roots because I was in the whole source of of doing things, and then I saw the PhD process as an opportunity to draw away and reflect on my own practices by watching someone else. Well, this is. I'm sorry, I can't remember names at this. It's classical Margaret Mead. You go out and you look at somebody else,
Yes.
not because you are so interested in them, but because you are interested in creating a position from which you can look at yourself and us and our own society.
Wonderful, wonderful description. Only this kind of alienation shines through from your material somewhat, because there's a position of reflection that's once removed, and you are not in there. You are in a sense just this is disinterested observer, a neutral kind of. When you describe some of these rituals or
Yes.
this.
Yes, of course that's a lie. That's a complete lie. I am unable to be disinterested when I am part of these rituals. But it's kind of how you write it. So maybe I felt that being too engaged was a fault for being a researcher, too participant.
What would you say today?
Today I would say I could never have understood it if I hadn't engaged. So it's in a way it is the participant observer is doing and reflecting at the same time.
But you write about that.
I know. Isn't that terrible?
So if you should write something about it now,
Yeah.
what would you write?
What I just said.
You have to repeat it.
No, I would write that to be able to understand something and appreciate it fully, you have to participate, and you have to do that dual position of being a reflector of something. I mean, you reflect on the practices as they are happening and continually kind of trying to find out what they are. And I think at least, I mean, that's the same process I've been going through the rest of this reflection as well, because I mean the concepts, I have understood them better as the more I have been engaged.
Thank you.
So, yes.
Yes. So in a sense, you are you,
Yes.
and have been reflecting as a you, even though it doesn't sound so much. But who are we in this first phase? Who would you say, if you have second order reflection, who would be the we that you identify with?
Organizational researchers, is that a term? People,
Yes.
other people who are reflecting on organization. I mean, that is a scientific community. Other people who are interested in the same field.
Yes. So organizational scholars, that's what I call
Yes.
us. But,
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
More precise.
There was a NEO conference of organizational scholars in Norway the last 2 days, just for information. So if you're interested in more of a community around that, this is the kind of advertisement. After all, I'm from a business school. There is such a community. But that's all, that's a digression. So, yes. So that's the we that you reflect sort of with. During
Yes.
this first,
Yes, that's the we.
yeah. And who are the them during this phase?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, because as a participant observer, I am also reflecting with them, being the informants, being the data. So, but they, I mean, I also included those in the topics that interested me. I didn't kind of post the questions in one community and get data from one. I have never been able to separate that fairly. But I mean, I think that I have thought of the topics related to organizational scholars as most interesting to take in one community, and then if they wanted to reflect with me, and some of them have in the life works, I have shared freely with them as well.
And how did you invite them? How did you do it specifically? How did you get the information? How did you get these
the common reflections?
Yes.
I invited to Skype meetings. I asked for time at their live power exchanges, so at the weekends I said, you know what, I want feedback on what I've been thinking. I did draw so many things that I haven't written about. Drawn interviews,
yes.
Where they had an A3 piece of paper,
yeah.
Where they had colors and kind of drew their life and their involvement in these kinds of engagements. I got them to carry notebooks for Slentring,
yeah.
Which is
yeah.
kind of the mental strolling.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of things to try to
get out. And how did that get put back into the community?
I don't know.
If you try and think, did it at all? Or was this researcher single hero journey?
I don't know that has been more than fanciful speculation together with informants. If they have used it, I think they are kind of self-contained in their creativeness. So I don't think that my contributions were one of several. I mean, taken in as impulses in the same way that any others. I don't think that it was especially important that I was a researcher.
No, I'm more interested in if, as a researcher, you risk yourself in the discussions with the participants,
yes.
And the consequences, and have to live with the consequences as they come. And if there were some instances when you felt that this was difficult or hard, I mean,
no, more that nobody cared.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
hard.
That what I did was of no consequence. Yes.
You may be humble. We'll see. But then you mobilize a community and you make it move. I'm not one person, of course, one person cannot do that. But did you do anything or work with the life workers or anything to mobilize the community, either of organization scholars or locals, for your research project, for your research questions? How did you involve them in your journey for knowledge?
I started with a kickoff. That's, yeah, it says here, I invited both my researcher friends and my life workers, data people, and we spent 2 days together discussing my thesis. So that was pretty productive, and that was to make sure that I had the party, because you know that the party at the end isn't guaranteed.
So you did.
So, but after that, no, I didn't do much in that kind of way. I kind of participated at events that other people did.
Yeah.
And then participated in academic conferences.
We'll come to that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, this is very good reflections. There's 2 years actually. That's a quite long period.
Yes.
To be with people and to what kind of reflections you engage in and invite them in for actually matters a lot. And in conventional research, we don't engage that, the others outside so much. We sort of export them and their senses as data into a different world. And you have, at least in the beginning, you attempted both. You attempted actually to engage them in the quest for knowledge. Thank you. Then we'll go on to the next phase. That's from September 2010 to 2011. And this is an entirely different world, it seems. But here you talk about social media and about practice theory and process theory. And that's a very different position in terms of concepts and practices.
Yes.
So how did this, what did you do here?
Reading these different rooms on Facebook
Yeah.
where suddenly it popped out kind of 100 messages for one day. That was, for example, once they popped up this group called 17,000 Reasons Not to Participate at hay raising. Do not participate, do not. And it was like, what is this? I was kind of floundered to get this kind of data also when I was far away.
And did you participate? Did you write? Did you send pictures? Were you an active reflector in this phase?
No.
With your no.
I just recorded.
Okay. So
Yeah.
then you're really out of the observer in a sense.
Yeah.
And what did you get out then of practice theory and process theory? How did that shape your understanding of what was going on? If you can remember now.
I mean, what I think is most important about practice theory is that the kind of position where, because we are continually doing things, we are neither totally constrained by the social structures, but we are not free of them either. So I think that's the kind of main topical interest that I took out of it, that it's such an iterative process of making a practice. Is that a question good enough for you?
Answer.
Yeah?
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 Yeah. And that's what I understand what you just say. And that is, again, this is a very different situation from your first situation. So it's
Yes.
not like if you were in the field and then you went out and did some writing and came up with a thesis and
Yes.
submitted that. There were two very different experiences that's
Yes.
based and you got material from in a sense.
Yes.
And then the third phase in April 2011,
Yeah.
you are back again with live power exchanges.
Yes. That's when Birchbay, the Craziness Symposium happened.
And you are more now into Foucauldian analysis.
Yes.
What would be the difference then between your sort of dispersive fields that you're engaged with in these different?
No, because then I went from going, what is happening in practice, and then Foucauldian analysis is very much that what happens with ideas, how are they constituted, and how are different fields of academia constituted? So how do we get these points of view on the strategy subject, on entrepreneurship, on creativity? Where do they come from? So that's the kind of interest that was also. That's when I started making not only the LifeWorks my data, but also the theories on experience economy. I had to kind of place them within kind of also a different practice field, but a practice field of theories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is good. In a sense, it's the usual way of developing a PhD, going into piece by piece.
Yeah.
You seem to have more cracks.
More cracks.
Yes. Yes. That is usual. And that's why I looked at this table and I saw the lines here. They can be seen as cracks in your material.
Interesting.
And light shines through these cracks.
Yes.
And this is what I'm interested to hear about.
Yes.
Because there is now when you went back to live power exchanges,
Yeah.
then you could look at the social media part, or you could look at the first part of your fieldwork. What do you see when you look back? What did the change in position do for your understanding?
Well, I mean, when I started a pretty conventional thesis, and I was going to write 3 papers and an umbrella or a jacket around them. Both those 3 papers.
Okay.
And then, well, as I realized that I was nearing the end, and I had to kind of place everything into a larger perspective than just writing about specific techniques. I wrote 1 paper on deliberate dyslexia, which is taking resources out of the misreading of language. I had 1 paper on pseudoscience and 1 on using art in interventions. So I went from kind of very specific interests in particular things that people were doing, and into a kind of a larger whole, because I needed to kind of situate theory as well as practices.
Yeah, and this is part of your adaptive approach, as I would see it.
Yes.
Even though you don't talk much about that.
No.
You don't explain, you don't give us this input to understand how you arrived at your knowledge.
Luckily, somebody is filming this, so I can just transcribe it.
Now you can just transcribe your answers and then yes. And where are those papers now, if I may ask? That has nothing to do really with this opposition, but it's in a sense part of the knowledge that you are bringing to the world.
Yeah, you know scarcity? I had too little time and too much life to live, so they are I never published them.
Oh, so they can come later maybe, or are you done with them? I mean,
No, they're not. I mean, I guess that they will be better now that I have made a frame for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's quite a big change to do that you have done.
Yes.
And some would say that's foolishness. Well, we have had a lot about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's very brave. And that's in a sense being loyal to the data and to the insight that you are gaining on this journey. And that's what research, for me, research is about. Not trying to stick to some categories and some papers that you have and just finish them in order to finish them. But could you reflect or talk about that way of thinking, those choices? What were behind this way? Because it's not the conventional academic approach, I would say.
Yeah, I can reflect on it, or
yes.
I could give you a practical answer.
Both, please.
And I wonder, is foolishness and bravery a duality?
I would say they belong in different universes, but that's...
I mean, practically what happened was another child, see, I've got two of them. It's Idun, who is 9, and Vegard, who is 5. Hi, Vegard! Hi! And when Vegard was born, afterwards, I got sick. So I stayed out of work life for a couple of years. And if I'd been smart, I'd probably buried my thesis and just said, let's be done with it. And just realized I'm never going to be an academic. And then I couldn't do that. So that's why I continued. And then I also changed practically. I changed supervisors, which also by devising, or at least how it happened. Morten Levin, who was my supervisor, had a very instrumental way of doing supervising. So then I had to switch to a monography after writing all these papers.
Yeah.
But I think it got better because of that. But then so it's kind of, that allowed kind of the abductive jump. Because abduction is always kind of at some point a jump that you later have to justify.
Yeah.
From the abductive jump from looking at these techniques to what are they really. And also, I just have to say that my thesis was it was called Developing with Positive Deviance. And positive deviance, I realized, was the same type of concept that is, as a social antenna, because as soon as people heard it, they ran away with it and defined it in ways that I didn't choose. And then in literature, it was defined as deviating from norm in honorable ways, which I immediately disagree with, because who can decide honorable? So realizing that kind of concept was futile. It was an aesthetic information. Well, that's the word I had to kind of come up with to name what I had been trying to do. So I think I'm rambling now, but it's
no, you're really you're going deep.
Yeah. But that's the changing from this concept, and academically, a lot of people thought it was very interesting that I was doing research on positive deviance, because it was, I mean, it's such a rich concept that kind of attaches itself, but nobody could agree on my definition of it.
So you had to stick to it yourself and develop a theory around that.
Well, finally I left it. It's not mentioned in the thesis because...
I think of the aesthetic innovation.
Oh yeah, no,
but
positive
that was
deviance.
Yeah.
I realized I had to leave as a concept because it was an aesthetic innovation. It was too difficult. It was not usable as a scientific concept.
This is, it really digs into the research method. It may sound as theory of science, but this is what science is made of. So that you explain so well now. You explained what happened between phase 1 and 3, and I apologize if I have pushed you too far into the personal detail. They're not supposed to happen.
Oh, that's okay, because I actually published it in to get into personal detail. The one thing that I've written that has been read by more people than anything, more than 100,000 people read my op-ed article in NN43, which was called "I Don't Understand Why I'm Sick and How This Feels." So it's like, if you search my name on Google, that's what you'll find.
Yeah. And this basically shows what we crave, what we all crave, what we need, what we look for in these kinds of works, but we hide in a sense. Not too well, and especially not here, because the light shines through the cracks in your thesis, and that's what I like about this thesis. So, to go on, now we have come to phase 4.
Yes.
And now comes creativity. And I must say, I come from the innovation field, and I have struggled with the term creativity.
Yes.
So you must please explain that concept and the research method for researching creativity.
No, I didn't do that. You see, that's when I was starting to leave the research community to the Creativity Accelerator was a practitioner-led initiative that I agreed to come on board with. So I'm sorry, I had problems with the word creativity myself. That's why I like this nitty-gritty detailing duality and then dual judgment and getting more precise notations to talk about it. So yeah.
Well, we'll leave it at that. We have people here who are very good at this creativity thing, so we can leave it there.
Yes.
And I also then wanted, it seems there have been a long written passage for you through these fields and this knowledge. And what did you leave behind? You mentioned one concept you left behind, the positive deviation.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other or theories or positions or activities?
You mean the 170 pages that I cut from the manuscript this spring?
Why? And what was in there?
Yeah, how much time do I have? No, that's where I tried to reconnect to organizational theory and how entrepreneurship has been handled within organizations. So that was one. For example, George, who Craig noted that I've been using, he says, for example, that in organizations, to make the theory okay, you structure it so that everything that happens in theory follows the structure, and then in any deviation you put it on the person, so that the personality type becomes important. So if people are not creative, they can say, no, I'm not that kind of personality. And if people succeed, you say, oh, that's the right type. So that's those kinds of things. A lot of ideas, yeah.
Not quite sure
No.
I understood.
No, that's why it wasn't in the thesis.
Okay. Then we go on to the last phase, and
Yes.
that is you or 5 and 6, you have withdrawn from participation, and
Yes.
withdrawing gives another perspective.
Yes.
And how was that different from the position of observation, from your initial?
Well, I mean, for one part, I was living mostly in my head. And since I had left kind of the academic community, since my money had run out, it consisted mainly of trying to conceptualize what I'd learned. And then the only relationship, the meetings that I had with the Craziator and Amelia was to check. It was member checks, just to kind of see, did I understand this correctly? Do you agree to this way of understanding it?
What historians called critic.
Yes.
They were your sources and they criticized what you have made out of them. Can you say that?
Yes.
You gave them opportunity.
Yes, to
To-
feedback.
Yeah.
Amongst other, one thing I did, and I want to
Yeah.
mention that, I actually managed to recreate Marx's way of capitalizing on means, because some people had the means to give lectures so they could use any aesthetic innovation and get money from them, whilst people who were with the means to make things like this, but without the access to the channels of income, they could not do that. So that's exciting.
I look forward to that paper.
Yeah.
And then there's only one main questions I have then, and that's phase 6, when the formal phase of data collection is finished.
Yeah.
And I suppose you had a material of some sort.
A material.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you tell about
Yes,
that on page
yes.
53, what kind of material and type of data you had.
Yeah.
Now, how did you analyze it? How did you connect it? What did you do with all of this?
You know, I'm an anthropologist. I just took it in, digested it. No, I read through it many times, took notes. I tried using those en vivo and those kinds of programs,
Yeah.
but they did nothing for me. The only thing they did for me was the opportunity to go into the text and revisit it, but I found it really difficult to use it. And then, I'm sorry to say that that was just a way of staying with data and just reading it, taking notes, revisiting it again, and then making concepts, looking for the best ways to exemplify. And I've been doing that to the end. You know, the examples I got from the Bump Museum earlier?
Yes.
The pages from the book, I got those last week.
Ooh.
So I didn't know about the book
Yeah.
before that, but I knew about the Bump Museum.
Yeah.
But then I was like, what else? What happened? What more did you use it for? And that's when I got those pictures.
That's,
So-
there is a famous anthropological monograph from Edmund Leach from Burma. And they say he wrote that based on 40 pages of notes because he lost his body language. So you're not the only one to have digested very good analytical material based on that kind of, what shall I say, digestive science? Can we say that? Well, we can say it
I wonder
here.
if that's a different department.
Yeah. So, would you say that the form of your material, did it matter for your understanding of your exploration? Whether it was a digital source or a written source, video, I don't know if you have a video or this book.
I have videos and I have transcript audio. I recorded many of our conversations. Actually, I recorded both conversations I had with data and my supervisors.
Yeah.
Because I find it so difficult to remember. So it's easier to kind of delve into data when you're transcribing it, actually.
Yeah.
Um,
So did you notice any differences of any kind when you were approaching the data material? It may not be systematic, but some experience that, when it comes in this form, it gives a different.
I mean, I had more of a sense that, Facebook feeds, that they are more like found data, that they are existing without my interference.
Yes.
So, but obviously the interviews, I was very loosely structured. But of course, if you put somebody with a notepad in front of them, telling them to tell their lives, that's a very structured frame. So I think maybe the difference was between kind of found data, things that would happen also if I wasn't there.
Yeah.
That was, I recorded some of the sessions as well.
Yeah.
So that kind of gives not more pure, but I know that it's not created just by me, which is.
And which is a different position of reflection, actually.
Yes, if it's staged by me, I think then you are asking people for a reflection that you don't know would have happened if they weren't asked that question.
But what about the answers that you get? What about, we shall not talk about truth, not in the sense of the big truth out there, but of the real. You talk about the real.
Yeah.
How much of the real did you get through one form of data or the other, would you say? Would you get more of the imaginary?
I
from
think
Facebook?
65%, 65, 35. I think it's an interesting question I'm not able to answer, I'm sorry.
No, but that's fine, that's fair, that's fair. You have answered or not answered the questions that I had, and I really appreciated this conversation. I must say there was one thing I was very happy you didn't say, that I maybe had expected you to say, was that I wrote this table then, and now is now. And it's not. You staying with the table that you wrote in your dissertation. You're not leaving it behind. You're not just running into the future without bringing with you what you already had there.
Yes.
And that's very reassuring, because there is an abduction, it's an iteration, and that which has gone before is not gone.
No, it's still important.
It's still important, yeah. And to understand, and you have given more context now for the understanding of your dissertation. And I was thinking of Wittgenstein. He says the meaning of a word is in its use. And you have used the words in here in specific ways to convey specific meanings, so they worked for you into a dissertation.
Yeah.
And you remain true to that. So this is about reality also, and true knowledge in several different levels. So with this, I must say you have done a great job. You have made it easy for yourself, but you have done it, carried it through, and seen it through. So you will get the evaluation afterwards. But before I stop, do you have any questions that you have expect me to ask you?
Well, there was one thing.
Yeah.
Because I had expected you to ask me why I didn't have a thicker description. And I thought much about that, because you are absolutely right. I could have written so much more.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the difference between Katz, who introduced the term thick description, was that he didn't know what he was looking for. I had been looking it right in the eye, I just didn't know what it was. So that's why I had to control it. I think.
That's especially in innovation studies, where there is chaos, so much chaos and complexity. And that was a topic for the conference, by the way. So that means than being just open-ended.
Yeah, so in that way, I don't think I'm a traditional anthropologist.
No.
Also because this chapter, it's a contest of wills.
Whose wills?
Well, I found that if I talked too much about the life works, people were astounded by their practices, and then they were kind of off on their own roads, and it's like, I want to do an analysis here. So
yeah.
that's why it looks like that.
That means I had expected more of a thick description.
Yes.
But you have explained why it's not.
Yeah.
Both what you told me now and what you told me about the different phases and what you worked with during those and how they contributed to the knowledge that is in here. So I have no reason to ask that question.
Okay.
Okay. Then you put it down.
Degree. So what happens next? The committee will write a formal report and send it to the dean of the faculty, which means to me. And I'll make the final decision. Maybe we can have the conclusion quite soon. It depends on how fast the committee will be doing their work. So thank you for a very, I would say, entertaining discussion and presentation. I have a couple of things to give you behind this curtain. That's why it's a curtain. So this is from the faculty.